So the key question that we are trying to answer in this video series is why modernize? Hello, my name is Thor Giddings and I am the America's SA leader for Microsoft Technologies on AWS. And today I want to walk you through the 6 key business drivers that modernization can help with. As with all problems within an organization, you should always start with determining what is the problem. Here I have listed some of the most common reasons I hear from our customers as the challenges they face. Keep in mind that most organizations are actually experiencing several of these issues at the same time. The first is scaling. Do you have issues with responding to your customers' demand or providing a consistently good experience? When dealing with physical or virtual servers in a data center, it is often the case to provision for peak usage, configuring your platform to make sure you have enough capacity to deal with the busiest of times. But with modernization and AWS cloud technology, you can leverage different services and configurations to scale to the right size automatically. The second pain point is often infrastructure and operational costs. Customers are often spending more than they need or want to on things like operational overhead due to the amount of time and effort it takes to manage infrastructure on premises. Additionally, when dealing with traditional infrastructure, most customers are dealing with lengthy capital procurement cycles that not only take a long time to plan, but also require upfront commitment to a specified capacity and configuration. When modernizing, you will have the ability to move to a lower cost model that no longer requires these long procurement cycles. Also, when leveraging fully managed services, you can cut operational overhead and leave the undifferentiated heavy lifting to AWS. The third pain point is project delays. Does your organization have issues committing to and hitting deadlines? Are your customers frustrated with the number and speed of you releasing new features? Through modernization, you can start to decouple your platform, which will lead to smaller, more frequent releases. The fourth pain point is agility. When customers start looking at the AWS cloud, one of the top reasons is agility. The ability to move quickly in an ever changing world is very compelling. If you couple this with a modernization strategy, you can start to react to your customers' needs and deliver to them the innovation and new technologies that they are demanding. Also, there is no need to make wholesale code changes to add new technologies to your platform with AWS. You can simply plug in different fully managed services and start taking advantage of them immediately. The fifth and final pain point that I'd like to talk about is digital transformation. 47% of CEOs are being challenged by their boards to move to a more digital business. So it is very common that IT departments are the ones who are responsible for leading these changes. With modernization, you'll be able to not only move towards a digital model more quickly, but adapt and react to those things as you work through your digital transformation strategy. So, what are the 6 key business drivers? The first is the ability to improve workforce productivity, making sure the highly valuable and scarce resources you have in your IT department are working on the problems that provide the most value to your business. The second is improving your business agility, making sure that you can respond to your customers' needs so that you can stay ahead of your competition and remain competitive in your market space. The third is increasing operational resilience. All of the innovation and optimization in the world doesn't help you if your customers cannot access or do not trust your platform. Modernization can help you increase your operational resilience and help you build on a reputation of reliability. The fourth is better time to value. Modernization can help you work on many different levels to fix and tune the releasing of new features in your platform. The fifth is cutting operational costs, reducing the amount of time you take to spin up new infrastructure or even utilize and deploy new technologies. The final driver is cost avoidance. When modernizing, you're starting to build your platform of the future instead of investing in a legacy platform. Additionally, depending on how you adapt to different aspects of modernization, you can use it as an opportunity to downsize and or reduce those expensive, long-term, old guard technologies that are prevalent in legacy platforms. So let's dig into each of these drivers and talk not only about the underlying problems you might be facing, but some potential solutions you can leverage in your modernization journey. It's important to point out that with most of these solutions, you may already have some technologies that you use today, and that's great. You will find that many of these technologies will have native support in AWS. I don't expect you to change the things that are working for your company, but for those things that you don't have a solution for, or your current solutions are not meeting your needs, I'll be talking about some technologies that AWS has that can maybe fill in those gaps. But before we get started, it's important to realize a few things. And the first is to not try to boil the ocean. Don't think about modernization as an all or nothing proposition. Be realistic about the things you cannot change. Things like your IT budget. Chances are that's already fixed. Most organizations can't afford to stop and retool. You need to keep making progress on your platforms and keep evolving your customer experience. Finally, you may not have in house expertise in all the technologies that you need or want to implement. So let's try to focus on the things that drive immediate value. Try to make an impact as quickly as possible to add momentum behind your modernization efforts. Focus on what differentiates your company. What are the things that make your company stand out? And what could you do to make these things better? Finally, the things that you will not be immediately modernizing, work on remediating those to make them more resilient and scalable. So, when we talk about workforce productivity through the modernization lens, there are several things we can address. The first is the continuous integration, continuous deployment process. Now, you might already have parts of this built, or you might be starting from scratch. Through the automation of your CI/CD processes, you can start to focus your IT efforts on more value-oriented tasks. We offer a host of CI/CD tools and offer plugins to several popular tools like Azure DevOps and Jenkins. Second, start using cloud native services for managing your operations. This is especially true if you have not automated things like configuration management, patching, and license management. But even if you have some solutions for this, do they work across your portfolio or are you using multiple solutions based on your business groups or workloads? With AWS, you can start to hone in on just a few tools to manage your different workloads, making it more simple to operate and more efficient. Lastly, breaking down monolithic architectures into smaller, more maintainable microservices is a true key to modernization. Lastly, breaking down monolithic architectures into smaller, more maintainable microservices is a true key to modernization. Monolithic architectures are ones where the entire application is deployed in a single step and typically uses a single code base. Microservices will come up repeatedly in this learning series and affects every business driver. From a workforce productivity perspective, you will find that having a clean separation between microservices allows developers to focus in on the core things that the service provides instead of worrying about how changes will affect the broader system. Next, let's talk about how to improve business agility through modernization. First, with microservices, you can get to faster and concurrent deployments. Since you no longer have to deploy the entire application in a single step, you can be more agile with the individual pieces. Each microservice can adapt and grow independently, and you can even version control different implementations so that other services that depend on the microservice do not have to change immediately due to one service being updated. There is also an inherent agility when moving to AWS. plugging in new technology instead of creating, adapting, or implementing. For example, if your existing platform has a need for IoT, you no longer need to be an expert in setting up the backend systems, making sure that they are scalable and reliable, and you can quite simply plug into the AWS IoT services and start working. It is also important to note that AWS supports all of the most popular programming languages like .NET, Java, JavaScript, Go, Python, C++, Ruby, PHP, and Node.js. By utilizing the corresponding SDK for your programming language, you offload the undifferentiated heavy lifting of calling our web services directly. Another great example of plugging in technology is in machine learning. We believe that in the fullness of time, every application will be infused with some sort of machine learning. But it can be very complicated and complex for a company to start down the data science path of solving problems via machine learning. With AWS, we provide a vast array of machine learning services. These allow you to both use pre trained models for common use cases like image recognition and also fully managed platforms like Amazon SageMaker to build out models based on your data. Finally, plugging in technology doesn't have to be all about the latest and most exciting technologies. You can also plug in technology with your existing infrastructure. A good example of this is Amazon CloudFront, our content delivery network that can help you accelerate your applications by caching content closer to your customer base. All of these things can help you increase your agility, respond to your customers, and build a more modern, responsive customer experience. Very strong operational resilience is the standard when it comes to digital experiences. Through modernization, along with utilizing AWS services, you can increase your resilience for not only your newly modernized code, but also the existing infrastructure. At AWS, our CTO, Werner Vogels, likes to say everything fails all the time. And this doesn't mean that AWS is unreliable. In fact, quite to the contrary. What he is saying is that you have to architect in a way that things can fail without having significant impacts to the entire platform. Now, how does that play into modernization? Well, first, when you start to leverage highly scalable and available services, there's an inherent resilience in there. AWS builds their services to be highly reliable based on a regional concept. So when you use fully managed services like Amazon S3 for object storage, you no longer have to worry about scaling the system or making sure that it is ready in case of a loss of physical infrastructure. You can simply plug in some code into your application and leave the management overhead to AWS. Next, let's talk about what you can do with your existing architecture. Now, I have to caution you, depending on how your existing application was built, you may have to do some changes in order to leverage a multi availability zone or multi region architecture. These changes usually crop up when your existing infrastructure is based on a single server, and that server is holding some sort of stateful information. Take a web server, for example, that holds the session data in its local memory. Obviously, you couldn't migrate this into a two server model with a load balancer because the session state would be problematic. These kinds of changes, though, are typically easy to remediate and don't involve long development cycles or changing significant portions of a platform. Now, you might ask yourself, should I be using multi availability zone or multi region? And the answer really depends on your business case. Our regional concept is built so that AWS can withstand the loss of physical infrastructure in an availability zone without affecting the resources in the other availability zones in the same region. This is how we build our highly available managed services, and we make it easy for customers to leverage the same infrastructure for their applications. Finally, with modernizing to microservices, there is an inherent gain to operational resilience. With a microservice pattern, you can have cleaner and clearer boundaries between application components, and you can architect for individual services to be at reduced capacity or fully offline depending on the business needs. You can use messaging and queuing services to hold transactions to be processed at a later time, or to throttle incoming requests so that systems do not get overwhelmed. In traditional monolithic architectures, you may be seeing issues in your platform even if just one module is having a problem. With microservices, you can minimize the impact to the greater platform. So let's talk about modernization and how it can lead to better time to value. Right now, if you're working in a monolithic architecture, you have to coordinate all the different features and changes into a release. This causes you to delay features until the last feature in that release is done, or worse yet, it forces you to pull features because they cannot be completed in time. There is an inherent risk to developing in this approach. If you have a problem, most of the time it's a rollback scenario. Since you are deploying an entire platform, it may be days or even weeks until you can try this again. With modern architecture, you can increase your rate of innovation since your individual components are autonomous. They can have independent innovation and advancement. Now, we talked about CI/CD from a productivity perspective before, but the same argument can be made around decreasing the amount of time it takes to develop and test your software. With automated building, testing, and deployment of code, you can spend considerably less time troubleshooting environmental issues and increase the consistency of your deployments while reducing the overall time it takes to get a feature through your lower environments. Finally, you can start to leverage cutting edge services in your existing applications. Again, it's as simple as plugging in the new technology instead of trying to make sure that the technology works. You no longer have to worry about how to productionalize or operationalize it, so you can go from concept to reality in orders of magnitude faster. Some examples of this are Amazon EMR. If you have ever tried to stand up and productionalize a Hadoop cluster, you know it isn't a trivial task. And if using Hadoop for big data analysis is just a small portion of what your application does, you can start to spend a disproportionate amount of time managing the system versus building features for your customers. Also, if you're using existing popular technologies like Hadoop or Redis, you can often find fully managed versions on AWS that can allow you to simply migrate and change your application endpoints. Another newer technology you can utilize is Amazon Quantum Ledger Database. QLDB is a technology that allows you to store transactions with very verifiable integrity. This can be used to augment other database storage technologies. For many customers, when they look at their legacy architecture, they use a traditional relational database like SQL Server or Oracle to store their data. They may have a need to store transactions and have built a number of triggers and security rules to create a system to record these. But with QLDB, you can carve out those transactions and store them and know that they are cryptographically verifiable and stored correctly without any additional management overhead. Finally, let's talk about Amazon Translate. We continue to live in a more globally competitive world, and companies often have to create content for multiple markets and languages. Amazon Translate is a deep learning based service that allows you to translate between languages. You can plug this service into your existing code and solve for some of your translation needs. For example, if you're uploading your web content, you could actually store and translate the new content in a simple event driven architecture. Now, you might say, well, we have native speaking translators do this for us today because we need a perfect translation. With that, how would you like to reduce the overhead and make them more efficient? You could actually take the original information in the original language, run it through Amazon Translate, and then have the human translator see both the original and translated text. This would reduce the manual overhead and also increase the productivity of your workers. So through modernization, you can get from a customer request to a developed feature much more quickly. So now let's talk about cutting operational costs with modernization. When moving to AWS or starting a modernization project, the typical pushback and the starting point is almost always cost. Again, most companies have a fixed IT budget, so there might not be any money set aside specifically for modernization. But the good news is there are a few things that you can do to help cut your operational cost, freeing up time and money. The first thing is to use fully managed services. This is especially true for systems that you currently administrate that AWS has a managed service for. For example, if you are currently managing a Redis cluster, look into using Amazon Elasticache, which offers a Redis implementation. You will no longer have to worry about and spend time managing and maintaining your Redis cluster. And this also has a compounding effect for most customers since they are using a specific service in multiple environments and not just production. So instead of offloading the overhead of one workload in production, you could be offloading the management overhead for the entire technology for your company for all workloads and environments that use that technology. The second thing is to use infrastructure as code for environment creation and teardown. Now, AWS CloudFormation is a service that allows you to take a resource definition called a template and create those resources in AWS in an automated way. This helps you with overhead because it not only allows you to make the necessary changes to the template when you need to change your resources for a workload, but it also gives you a great way to define and then repeatedly create the resources in other environments, saving you both setup time and cutting the complexity and troubleshooting time. Additionally, with AWS CloudFormation, it is very straightforward to tear down an environment and have CloudFormation remove all the resources being used for the environment. So you won't need to be spending time doing that either. A third way to cut operational overhead is through autoscaling. Now, what I'm talking about here is the actual effort of scaling up and scaling down an environment, determining when to bring new servers online or add capacity or take it away from resources. There's an inherent overhead in the planning and execution of doing this manually, and it's also a high risk operation. It's also important to point out that these three things can not only be used as part of your modernization strategy, but these are things that you can start doing today with your existing applications on AWS. Next, let's talk about cost avoidance. This will be a key way you can help fund and sell your modernization efforts. We just talked about auto-scaling in terms of operational overhead, but the main share of the cost reduction is through just consuming less resources. With on-premises, you typically provision for the peak, which obviously can be pretty wasteful in terms of resources. With auto-scaling, you scale up and scale down based on system demand. And with AWS, you're paying per use. So you're saving by reducing the amount of resources you are consuming while still providing a great experience to your customers. AWS Lambda is a great way to build new microservices with support of the vast majority of popular programming languages. That your developers can build new microservices utilizing serverless technology. With AWS Lambda, all the scaling and resiliency is taken care of automatically. I've had several customers that have seen a tremendous cost reduction for their lower non-production environments by using AWS Lambda. This is primarily due to the fact that their non-production environments are used a very small fraction of the time, but when on premises, those applications were running 24/7. The next way to avoid cost is to avoid downtime. With AWS, we make it easier to build fault-tolerant infrastructure, and this is for both the existing architecture along with what you're modernizing. Additionally, when you look at services like AWS EC2, our service for virtual machines, there are a tremendous amount of fine-grained configurations to get the right amount of resources for your application. So even though you might be running on a higher number of instances so that you are fault tolerant, you can tune the size of the individual instances and gain resiliency while minimizing any additional costs. Finally, think about avoiding what I would call lengthy version 2 projects. The concept of making sweeping wholesale changes to a platform is inherently risky and often drives to a higher cost model for a number of reasons. When you do big bang deployments, all features are deployed in a single step and wait for the last feature to be developed. When doing a modern continuous development and improvement process, each microservice can move forward independently. So you don't have to work overtime to get a major release out just to get your features to your customers. So why you and why now? We want to talk about durable advantages to your company. We talked about scaling, resiliency, cost, and operational efficiency, and agility. These things don't go away just because you're not actively modernizing that platform. These are all things that will continue to move forward and evolve. They can be seen as durable advantages, not only for your company, but also for the impact that your customers are seeing in a better customer experience. Next, the reality is that you have to choose where to invest your company's future. You can choose to invest it in a legacy platform or you can start to modernize. So, why not invest in the future platform and put your money into where you are going in the future? Finally, through modernization, you can increase your effectiveness and value now. Don't wait until there's an event, such as a large customer leaving your company or downtime. Proactively start modernizing and show that the value on that investment is higher with modernization. So you might be saying, yes, okay, I get it. I've tried it, or I have tried to try it, and I don't know where to begin. So let me help you there. First, you want to analyze your application. Find out where you can make the greatest impact. Look for the most used parts of the application and how they impact your customers. Next, take a look at the architecture. Find the issues in the architecture within the platform. Find the pain points and address the weaknesses in the architecture. You don't have to modernize everything to fix your underlying architectural issues, but you do need to understand these and how they impact the platform. Third, you start to modernize. Find what has the highest value and business impact. Look at carving out those pieces of the application and rebuilding them as microservices. The next thing you want to do is remediate. You know where those architectural issues are from step two. Now is the time to remediate those issues. You don't have to modernize to fix those issues. Additionally, you don't want your resources focused on dealing with downtime instead of building the new services. You want to start building your reputation of excellence for your platform, and remediating your existing architecture will help you with that. Finally, repeat. Once you address the most critical needs, go back to the top and use it as a flywheel. Rinse and repeat, always repeat. There are no rules that say you have to do projects serially. In fact, most companies will start working on their most critical platform first, do some modernization, and then start modernizing other applications. So instead of one flywheel, you start to see several flywheels turning in parallel. So hopefully it is now obvious as to why you should modernize. But how do you sell that to your organization? Well, we asked a sample of our customers across different industries to share their experience around how they quantified benefits and return on investment to measure the business impact of enterprise modernization. Here's what we found. Our customers realized an 88% return on investment, 79% improved speed to market, 10% reduced cost of legacy app maintenance, 6% reduced cost of new application maintenance, and a 5% acceleration of customer onboarding. So, who wouldn't want that, right? Along with the internal interests, there are also external pressures that CIOs, CTOs, and other technology leaders are currently facing. The reality is that companies are becoming increasingly more global and products are becoming completely digital. Some statistics back this up. Now, these are from a Gartner study. 47% of CEOs are being challenged by their board to make progress into a digital business. 79% of CIOs believe that digital business is making their IT organizations better prepared to change. Finally, 67% of all business leaders believe that they must pick up the pace of digitalization to remain competitive. So the good news is that you're not alone. Many other companies are on the same journey. And with AWS, we would love to also help you with your modernization efforts. So to recap, there are 6 key business drivers we talked about in this session. Improving your workforce productivity, improving your business agility, increasing operational resilience, delivering a better time to value, cutting operational costs, and cost avoidance. We talked about several concepts within each driver and how you can start to use your existing technologies along with some new AWS technologies to drive your modernization. Now, if all that seems a little high level, well, I have good news for you. The other videos in this series will help you deep dive on specific technical implementations for modernizing different aspects of your platform. So if you have interest in taking the next steps, please join us. We will have a discussion on how to break down your monolithic application into microservices, how to build in serverless and containers. Then we will work on the database layer and how to modernize it. We will then discuss how you can build out a data lake and how that can be part of your modernization efforts. Then finally, we will finish with talking about modernizing DevOps, specifically for serverless and containers. Thank you for taking the time and watching this video, and I wish you the best of luck in your modernization journey.